There was a drawer every foreman kept shut when visitors came through. Inside, tools with no guards, no warning labels, just raw steel, and 30 years of judgment in a man's hands. 10 tools every machinist in the 1950s swore by. OSHA made every one of them disappear. Subscribe and hit the bell. And down in the comments, tell us if you ever worked a shop or watched someone who did. And fair warning, we're not going in order of importance. We're saving the one nobody expects for the second half. Let's start with the tools that separated a good machinist from a great one. Item 1. The scriber and the soapstone. Long before laser etchers and CNC touch probes, every layout job started with a scriber, a hardened steel needle for scratching precise lines into metal, and a stick of soapstone for marking rough cuts on hot or oily stock where ink or pencil would not hold. Picture a machinist pulling a piece straight off the cutoff saw, still too hot to touch bare-handed, marking his cut line in soapstone before it even cooled. No chalk, no pencil, nothing else on that bench would survive the heat. A lot of old-timers kept a chunk of soapstone in a coat pocket their entire working life, the same way a carpenter keeps a pencil behind the ear. Running out mid-shift was treated almost like running out of coffee, but laying out a part was just the first step. The next tool is where that layout actually got turned into something real. Item 2. The lead-faced hammer. Before urethane dead-blow mallets showed up on every pegboard in America, machinists made their own soft-faced hammers by pouring molten lead into a hollowed-out steel or wooden head right there in the shop. No ventilation hood, just an open flame and a ladle. Picture the moment right after the pour, the head still faintly warm, being handed off before the next shift even started. Because a shop only needed 1 or 2 of these and everybody knew whose bench they belonged on. The lead was soft enough to seat a bearing or knock a stuck part loose without marring the finish, something a steel-faced hammer would ruin in one swing. And when the face finally dented from years of use, the old machinists didn't throw the hammer away. They just reheated it and re-poured the face right on the spot. That instinct, repair instead of replace, carried over into everything they touched, including the tools they used for the most precise work in the shop. Item 3. The vernier micrometer. Every measurement in a 1950s shop came down to a vernier micrometer, a barrel with 2 overlapping scales that had to be read by aligning tiny hash marks and doing quick mental math to get down to 1/1000th of an inch. No screen, no battery, no close enough. Picture a foreman walking past a bench, glancing at a part for half a second and calling out, "Check your mic," not because anything looked wrong, but because he'd seen 100 parts ruined by a mic that had been dropped the night before. That's why every good machinist re-zeroed and checked their micrometer against a known gauge block at the start of every shift, before it touched a single real part. Reading one of these cold, under pressure, in a hurry, was a skill in itself. A skill that's basically vanished now that digital calipers do the math for you. But measuring a part was only useful if you'd ground the right tool to cut it in the first place. Item 4. The hand-ground high-speed steel lathe bit. Today you snap a carbide insert into a holder, and when it dulls, you throw it away. In 1950, a machinist ground his own lathe tools out of solid high-speed steel, freehand, on a bench grinder, shaping the rake and relief angles entirely by eye and feel, with no jig to guide him. Picture a young hand holding out a freshly ground bit, and the foreman running a thumbnail across the edge without even glancing up. A nod meant back to work. A headshake meant back to the grinder. Every good machinist kept a small personal set of these, and they were almost never shared. A borrowed grind was a different man's angles, and it cut differently on your machine. The real skill wasn't the grinding itself. It was reading the sound and the color of the chip coming off the work to know, a half second early, exactly when the tool needed sharpening again. That kind of instinct is what let a machinist cut clean threads by hand, something the next tool made possible. Item 5. The homemade tap and die handle. Cutting threads by hand was pure bread and butter machinist work, and plenty of shops ran on tap handles. The machinists made themselves, turned from scrap round stock, drilled and set screwed to fit whatever odd-sized tap was on the bench that day. Picture the rhythm of it. Forward a half turn, back a quarter turn, over and over, feeling for the exact moment a tap started to bind before it snapped off flush inside the workpiece. Skip that rhythm and you'd shear a tap off inside hardened steel, and getting it out without a modern EDM machine could burn an entire afternoon. It's one of the only tricks from that era that never went out of style, and it just went out of common knowledge, and once a part was threaded and shaped, it usually ended up clamped in the one tool that did more jobs than any other on the bench. Item 6. The bench vise with the anvil horn. The classic machinist's bench vise wasn't just a clamp. It did double duty as a small anvil with a flat striking surface built onto the back of the jaw, and on plenty of models, a horn for hand-bending stock. Picture one tool bolted to the bench for 30 years straight, handling clamping, light forging, straightening bent rod, and standing in as an improvised press when nothing else was around. The rule every apprentice learned fast: never strike directly over the screw mechanism, always closer to the base where the casting was thickest, and never near hardened tool steel that could shatter on impact. That kind of built-in versatility is mostly gone from vices today, simplified down to clamping alone. And that instinct for making do with less is exactly what's about to get tested, because not every tool from this era holds up under a modern eye. Subscribe and hit the bell if this is bringing back a shop or a workbench you remember. And tell us in the comments what tool got passed down to you that nobody makes anymore. Item 7. The tang file without a handle. Walk into a shop today and every file has a molded handle, a rubber grip, a safety collar. In 1950, a file was just bare steel with a sharp, pointed tang sticking straight out the back. No handle at all half the time. Picture a machinist working fast at the end of a long shift, choking up on a bare tang with nothing but a folded shop rag between his palm and the point, because that's simply how it was done. Some drove a wooden handle on themselves with a mallet, shaping it to their own grip. Others just learned through repetition to feel exactly where a hand was in space without ever looking down. Because looking away for 1 second with a bare tang in your grip meant a trip to the first aid kit. That kind of trust in a raw, unguarded tool is the same trust that ran through nearly everything in these shops, including the one piece of gear nobody today would ever recommend bringing back. Item 8. Asbestos-lined gloves and sleeves. This is the one we told you was coming. Machinists working near forges, brazing torches, and hot stock wore gloves and sleeves lined with asbestos cloth because it simply did not burn. It was marketed as a miracle material, fireproof, cheap, everywhere, from oven mitts to furnace linings to the gear on a machinist's own hands. Picture pulling on a pair of those gloves at the start of a shift, the same way you would grab your keys off a hook. No second thought, no hesitation, because nobody had any reason to think twice. By the time the danger became undeniable in the 1970s and 1980s, those gloves had already been standard issue for 2 full generations of tradesmen. We are not telling you this to bring it back. Quite the opposite. It is here to remind us how much trust those men placed in what was handed to them. and how far the definition of safe has come since. If you ever find an old pair in an estate sale or a toolbox at a swap meet, the right move is simple. Do not handle it with bare hands, and do not keep it as a curiosity in the house. What did survive from that era and what is worth remembering is something far less dangerous and far more personal. Item 9. The shop-made jig, never written down. Every machinist worth his salt built his own fixtures and jigs to hold odd-shaped parts steady for repeat work. And almost none of it ever got written down or drawn up on paper. Picture a drawer full of these, unlabeled, mismatched, meaningless to anyone else. But to the man who built them, each one instantly recognizable, ready to be pulled out the next time that exact job came through, sometimes years later. This is probably the biggest thing modern manufacturing lost in the shift to CNC programming. A shop's real knowledge wasn't in a filing cabinet. It was scattered across dozens of hand-built fixtures and the memory of the men who made them. When a machinist retired without passing that along, the knowledge simply vanished from the floor for good. It's part of why so many small manufacturers today are racing to document what's left of that know-how. The same way one small daily habit, still remembered by fewer people every year, is worth holding on to. Item 10. The personal oil can. Last one. Nearly every machinist carried a small, long-spouted oil can that belonged to him and him alone, usually tucked in a back pocket or hanging on a nail by his machine. Picture the first 5 minutes of every single shift, the same as the day before and the day before that, oiling the spindle, the ways, the moving parts, long before sealed bearings and automatic lubrication made that ritual disappear entirely. A good machinist oiled his machine at the start of the shift, not the end, so the metal had time to warm and the oil had time to work its way in before the first cut. That quiet 5 minutes, repeated the same way for 30 years straight, does not show up in any history book, but it is exactly the kind of detail that made these men who they were. 10 tools that built American industry with bare hands, hard-earned skill, and not a single safety label in sight, from a lead hammer poured right on the shop floor to a personal oil can that opened every single shift. This was a world where the tool and the man using it were almost inseparable. If this took you back, check out the next video right on your screen. There's a lot more of this vanished world waiting for you.